Hi, and welcome to the Ellis Talker Show. Today, I got a very special guest, the congressman that covers Ellis County, Congressman Jake Ellzey. How are you, sir?
I'm doing great. Happy New Year to all you and all your listeners. I hope you had a good Christmas. It's good to see you again. It's been a while.
You too. It has been a while. I know you've been busy over there. For those of you that don't know, right now the congressman is running for re-election, but he has served one term, sir, already.
One and a half.
1.5 terms, and then now he's running into another term. He covers all of Ellis County, some of Arlington, I believe, around Arlington, Mansfield, and up. But he's congressional 6th district, so I wanted to have him on.
And we go into Anderson County, we go into Freestone, Hill, Johnson. We got a lot bigger, a lot more rural.
Yes, and I wanted to get you on that way you could talk to the constituents because there's so much going on, sir, and you know it. And one of the things I wanted to get to was this government shutdown. So, there's talk about this government shutdown. There's talk about there being, because of the border, and we're going to talk about the border a bit, but because of the border, there's some Republicans who say we're not going to vote for anything. And there was a rules thing that didn't go through the other day, something that was normally pretty easy that didn't go through as kind of a buck towards the speaker. Where do you see these appropriations going, and do you see this government shutdown coming? Is it inevitable?
It is not inevitable. It's up to us, and a shutdown does nothing. That's my coffee maker. I'll answer you. Let me grab my cup of coffee. I'm a good Navy man, just like you.
Yeah, a man's got to have his coffee. Man's got to have his coffee.
So pecan coffee, strong for all your watchers. That's what I like to get, San Antonio. So to answer your question, no, it's not inevitable. It is up to us. This goes back a long way. Let's recall late September of 2022. And we had a bill that was by Byron Donalds, who's in the Freedom Caucus, HR 5525, which cut our spending by 8%. The top line was 1.47 trillion, and it encompassed a great deal of HR 2. That was going to do everything we wanted to do on the border. That bill right there was going to do everything we wanted to do on the border. And 21 of us voted no. I did not vote no. That was a Freedom Caucus bill. Chip Roy voted yes, and several others did, but 20 others did not. And that's why we are here today. Make no mistake, there is no other reason why we are here today than those 21 people who voted no on that bill. And even one of them came back and said later on, maybe I should have voted for that. So we're here because of what didn't occur in September. That was a fantastic bill. And then, of course, that got followed up with 3 weeks of not having a speaker. So let's go ahead and look forward. What does it look like now? A shutdown does nothing. No matter what anybody says on Twitter, Facebook, or any other social media device, a shutdown only emboldens our enemies. It pays everybody except our military and our border patrol. So if your concern is border security, do you really want to have a shutdown and not pay the people that are securing the border? I would argue that that's probably not such a good idea, and it never helps us, and nobody has the app. There's a few of them talking about it. And listen, you don't see me on Fox News talking about it because Fox News isn't interested in me because I am the quiet professional that I promised that I would be, and I don't talk about things that aren't going to be helpful. And the people who do, they're clickbait. It's really difficult in today's world. What's the truth? What is the news and what is opinion? I am not in favor of a shutdown. Those men and women overseas that are securing our, guaranteeing our freedom in Djibouti on aircraft carriers around the world, air bases around the world, 28,000 people in North Korea at a time very similar to 1938 when North Korea, Russia, Iran, and China are rearing their ugly heads like they did in 1938. The last thing we want is a shutdown, especially on the heels of the Secretary of Defense being AWOL for about.
We're going to talk about that. Yeah.
So we need to fund this government. As I said, we wouldn't have had to worry about this if we had done what should have been done back in September. But I don't anticipate a shutdown. I think that everybody's going to get together as we have in the end. Will there be a gap CR for the appropriations process? And of course, I'm an appropriator, so perhaps. But I see everybody coming back together eventually. We've got new leadership at the House Freedom Caucus. Bob Good has taken over as the chairman, a second term Virginian. and he took over from Scott Perry, a veteran and a very, very good man. I don't know Bob that well, but this may have been kind of a show of transitioning of leadership in the Freedom Caucus. I can't think for them, but I don't anticipate that's going to happen. It would be detrimental to our national security in many, many ways. We do not want a shutdown. And by the way, I meant to tell you this. When there's a shutdown, we don't save money. Everybody who's on contract, but I-35 won't get worked on if there's a shutdown for that duration. All of our interstates won't get worked on, but you know what? They'll still get paid back pay for work that didn't get done. That's the only thing that happens in a shutdown is everybody still gets their money, just nothing will happen. So I think that sends a bad message to our adversaries overseas at a time in which, admittedly, this administration has, through its weakness, has convinced some of our adversaries and our enemies that they can act without consequence throughout the world. It's a dangerous time in the entire world.
Congressman, there is a concern amongst your constituents, or at least there's been some chatter on it about the debt. I mean, we're over 30 some odd trillion and heading to 40 trillion on a rocket. And so there's concern about what's being spent and the thing that has been happening these last few years is like in the dead of night, right in the middle of Christmas. Didn't happen this year. We got a CR, but they drop a bill on you, and say, hey, we're going to vote on this tomorrow. Right. To appropriate the entire government. Do you see that happening? And if it happens, Congressman, are you going to vote for it?
Well, that won't happen because we're in charge. That happened under Nancy Pelosi, and that was what they call an omnibus. And no, and in fact, we've already got 7 appropriations bills passed through the House.
Oh,
we've already done 7 of these, and we got 5 more to go. Now with the new top lines, we're going to adjust those bills a little bit, and we'll see what happens with that. But that will not happen because we have the House. Now we need to act like it. So we all have to get together. The one thing that the Democrats have always done is go lockstep. Now, that shouldn't surprise anybody. We have independent thinkers in our party, and I'm proud of that. But we do have to fund the government. And the $34 trillion in debt, that has been in every administration for the last 40 years, Republican and Democrat. And so I've been here for 2.5 years. I'm on appropriations, and every appropriations bill cuts us back to fiscal year 22 numbers, and minus some. In fact, that bill that I mentioned earlier cut us below that. So we're talking about 1.59 trillion right now, and back in September it was 1.47 trillion. So it is hard to separate the wheat from the chaff on this 24-hour news cycle. You can get your news from Instagram, Snapchat, Twitter, Fox. I'm here to tell you that all of those bills, because Kay Granger from Fort Worth is the chair of the Appropriations Committee, and all of us Republicans have cut spending with these bills. If you have a CR, a continuing resolution, a pure CR, that keeps us at the fiscal year 23 levels. We don't want that. We want fiscal year 22 levels.
Pre-COVID
is when it went way, way outside. So we are cutting back. That's why we have to get these appropriations bills passed, and we got to pass this other bill.
You think they're going to be able to claw some of that COVID money back?
That's what we've already done. We already passed that out of the House. We clawed it back.
Okay.
It's got to get signed by the president. Now, remember, so since you bring that up, you claw it back in the House, what's the Senate going to do? Who controls the Senate? The Democrats do. Now, I anticipate a changing of the guard in 2024. I think we'll have 3 or 4 net gain seats, maybe 5, to where the Republicans are in charge of the Senate. And I think that you'll see a change in the White House, too. But until it gets signed by the president, it's not law. And now we can force his hand, as we have been proven adept at doing. If we all get together and vote correctly and together, you never get everything you want in any bill. I don't care if it's in city council. I don't care if it's in the county commission, the state legislature, or in Congress. Nobody gets everything they want. It's just that in a republic, that doesn't happen. But we've passed these good bills, and they need to get out of the House, through the Senate, and signed by the president.
So you're optimistic it'll move along?
I'm always optimistic. That is because I believe in this country. I believe in the people in this country. I believe in our communities. You look around at our communities and you think about the town you live in. It doesn't matter if it's Corsicana, Italy, Midlothian, Irving, Dallas. At the base level in your high school, you got kids in high school? I do. I've got a daughter in high school and a son in middle school. And the sports that we participate in, the sports we watch, and the when we hand out turkeys at Thanksgiving, at the community level, at the county level, and at the state level, we're happy. Things are going great in Texas. Things are going great in Ellis County, Midlothian, in Anderson County. At the local level, things are really, really good. Well, those same people are voting for our leadership in Washington, D.C. It's up here where you get a little goofy. Now, there's 435 of us in the House that they reflect their individual districts. And not all individual districts look like Texas 6. They're
Right.
all vastly different, especially when you get to the coasts. So from those 435, you're eventually going to find some good stuff to come out. But with a narrow majority, we haven't had this narrow of a majority in 90 years, where we're down to, I think, 2. Steve Scalise, our majority leader, is suffering from cancer. He's being treated right now in Texas, and it's very treatable. It's multiple myeloma, which is a blood cancer, and he's going to be fine. But he's out for the next couple of weeks. My point of telling you that is we're down to a 2-vote majority.
You got like 1 or 2, right? Yeah.
Yes, we do. So we need to stick together. And you know, I am of the mind that you can disagree with somebody without being disagreeable. And I think the key to that is going back to the Reagan type of politics where you don't speak ill of other people. What has happened is these things right here allow you to speak ill of anybody you want at any time. And it's not helpful. It's not helpful to the process. And when you're negotiating in good faith behind closed doors with somebody on how do you get this stuff worked out, and then you come out and the press is standing there with a microphone in your face, and you start talking about the person you were just dealing with, and you talk about them in a bad way. I don't care what team you're on. You and I both know you and I were on one of the best teams ever in the Navy.
Yes, we did.
You praise in public, criticize in private. You hash it out behind closed doors. The internet and multiple 24-hour news stations have allowed us to think that it's important that we speak ill of other people. Well, at some point, you're going to need the help of other people. So I believe in the 11th commandment, Reagan's 11th commandment. Don't speak ill of other people. They may have their differences of opinion, but if you speak ill of them in any team that you're on in life, they're not going to help you. Imagine if you're talking about a football team, the Dallas Cowboys, and the linemen are talking bad about Dak Prescott to the local NBC station. Well, that team's going to fall apart. They're not going to be 11-5, 12-5. Sorry, 12-5.
12-5. Ooh.
Yeah. So it's still a team. You're still on the same team. We're all working for the same thing.
Yeah.
And I promise you that I am too.
Now the border is bad. And then there was the speaker went down there with a bunch of House members down to the border to go look. And then that, I was talking to a few Border Patrol people I know, and that day the cartel made sure the traffic didn't come that way. It was one of those numbers. And I mean, I smile because I don't want to cry. It's like, it's just, they're coming in, it was in December, there was, and I know these numbers, there was upwards of 200,000 people that came over illegally over that border. 300,000. That's more. That's twice Ellis County, 3 times Ellis County. Maybe that's insane. That's insanity. So with that happening, of course they were threatening government shutdown, and there's a lot of talk about things. I want you to tell me, what are your thoughts on, and I know you've talked about this before, but what kind of progress are we making on that border?
With our government, the executive branch, the administration, is responsible for executing the laws that we have passed. It has chosen not to. The only leverage that we have is, as we have talked about before, so when we talk about this spending bill and then the border, we have talked about for 3 months up here that we're going to attach any other foreign aid, be it Ukraine or Israel, to border enforcement. There's a distinction here in that we're not talking about money at the border. We're talking about policies, remain in Mexico, Title 42, that with cooperation with the Mexican government to stop the policies, because we haven't lost any Border Patrol agents. We're spending just as much money as we ever did. But this administration invited people to come across the border. That's the difference. That doesn't require any money. We need to say that's going to stop. We need to say we're going to, and then the asylum rules. Senator Langford from Oklahoma is working on that very, very hard over in the Senate. It is our number one priority. We are losing 200 Americans every day to fentanyl poisoning, 100 to overdose, all controlled by the cartels, which are now in effect running Mexico and have for some time. The definition of narco state or not, I think that's debatable, whether or not their government is completely ineffective and the cartels run it, which would be a narco state, or if it's somewhat less than that. It's irrelevant to me. When you're losing, and by the way, all those chemicals in fentanyl, they're coming from China. Nothing happens in China without the express permission of the Communist Party of China. So if you're losing wartime numbers to fentanyl poisonings and overdose, 300 a day, like we did in World War II, what would you call that? I'd call that a conflict, at least. I'd call that worthy of retribution by taking out the cartels militarily. I think that's perfectly reasonable, or the threat thereof, in order to make the government of Mexico act. That's in addition to the illegal immigration, which is forcing us to spend billions and billions of dollars in every state and in every community to house, feed, educate, and medicate those folks coming over here. We can't sustain that. But those are policies initiated or not followed by this administration, not money. So there needs to be a distinction that this is enforcement policies, not money on this administration.
Congressman, do you favor impeaching Mayorkas? Because he's obviously derelict.
And I've been saying that for 3 years. Absolutely. No. And in fact, they held the first impeachment testimony at Homeland Security yesterday. Chairman Green began the first impeachment hearing in that committee yesterday. So absolutely. And I've been saying that from the beginning. It's dereliction of duty. And some people will say, well, what crime has he committed? Dereliction of duty. Dereliction of duty, which is exactly why I got with 3 of my fellow fighter pilots in the Mach 1 caucus and sent a letter to the president requesting that SecDef either be dismissed, or you better have a dang good answer why you didn't tell the administration that you had cancer for 3 weeks and then were AWOL for a week. So there is nothing about this administration that has shown any competency whatsoever. Not one single person has been fired since the disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021 in August. Nobody lost their job. And then the thing about the SecDef being AWOL for a week and nobody knew in the White House for 4 days, that's just doesn't make any sense. Military man, you can't go AWOL, right? You got AWOL, you'd get dismissed and probably go bread and water for a little while.
I didn't do that.
And I'm not assuming that you ever did that. I'm not assuming you ever witnessed bread and water. That's a Navy joke, because if you get sent to brig on a ship, your food is bread and water.
Bread and water.
But as a military man, you're not going to keep your job at best. So everybody's asleep at the wheel, which is why the world is such a dangerous place, which is why the 2024 election is so dang important. We need the House, we need the Senate, and we need the White House in order to stop this deluge of illegal immigration. And the last thing I'll say about the border is, and I know I'm circling back around, is the movie that came out with Jim Caviezel. We watched that, and it was human trafficking. On a moral basis alone, how can anybody say it's okay to have an open border where we know that coyotes are bringing in children with families that don't belong to the family, that the family's going to ditch, which have been found in ditches, or more likely passed on to human traffickers for the sex trade? That is human slavery in modern times. On a moral basis alone, and I don't care what faith you are or if you are faithless, allowing that to happen to children is absolutely unconscionable and is the definition of evil. If you want to take everything else out, you want to take fentanyl out, which I'm not saying you should, on that basis alone, we have to secure the border. And no nation can survive without a secure border. Tying it into that funding bill was not something we've been talking about. We've been talking about tying it into other aid for 3 months. So for somebody to flip the switch and say, well, it's got to do with this, but that's not what we've been talking about for 3 months, and everybody knows it. So they're being disingenuous at best if they're saying we're not securing the border with the spending bill. But that was never the plan, and you knew it. So as I said, back in September, we had a chance to secure the border. And the names are out there, and you can find them. I won't say them. But 21 members on the Republican Party voted no on that bill and then regretted it later. So they need to take responsibility for not voting for that bill.
Going back to what you were talking about, there was a mention about like 30,000 kids that are just unaccounted for. We don't know where they went. Supposedly they went with their tío, whatever. Nobody did DNA. Nobody checked nothing. And then I know for a fact that there's a sister, an Army sister of ours that works for the federal government and has found these kids working in places and shut it down. So there's things happening with that, and that all has to do with the border. Yes. And it's very unfortunate.
And they weren't testing for DNA either to see if they were related, and that's going to change. So that's part of what Mike Johnson, the speaker, has committed himself to doing. So we're playing a little whack-a-mole here. He is committed to securing the border. We knew that was coming, and it was never part of this spending bill. So it's going to be a part of any other aid package. And I don't know what that looks like. So if anybody has suggested, and I've heard it suggested, that I'm doing something for aid for another country, it's patently false. I don't know what those aid packages look like. And for the Texas delegation, we are all committed to securing our country first. That is job number one of any government, is to secure and protect the citizens of that country. That's job number one. And that's how I see it too.
Yeah, definitely. Well, I mean, it's that one's a big one, but we're getting, and you know, I'm going to ask you one question. I know you don't like these type of questions, but do you think it's intentional what's happening here at this border? Do you think that's intentional?
Are you asking me about the administration?
Yes.
Yes, but I don't know why. I can't fathom it. Again, you see things that don't make sense. It's like a red spade on the card. You see it, but there's no way they can be this incompetent unless they're meaning to do it, right? So that's why we're impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas. Now, the problem with an impeachment is not that you're getting rid of somebody, but the fact is that do you think that you're going to get a different change in leadership or policies when he's gone? Are you going to have the votes in the Senate? Do we have the time or do we have? I believe in impeaching Alejandro Mayorkas, and I've called for it. But we're on the clock for keeping the government operating, for making sure there are troops. By the way, we're getting a 5% raise, which is much needed in this inflationary time for our and a bonus for our youngest enlisted troops in these times of high inflation. So you have to kind of prioritize, because we're not here around the clock. And we don't have to work on a 24-hour schedule. And since we're doing regular order as Republicans, because you talked about Nancy dropping that omnibus bill and we vote on it the next day, we believe in regular order, which is 72 hours to view a bill. So everybody can debate it. You can add amendments to it, and then you bring it to the floor. Then you bring it to the Rules Committee, and then you vote on this bill. So it does take time, and we're on the clock because we extended to January 19th, and then other spending we extended to April. So we're on the clock. Now I'm committed to staying here as much as we need to get that accomplished, because we can't keep running from CR to CR. The biggest problem with that is the Defense Department cannot build new systems. We need new systems. We need new ships. And the war in Ukraine is showing that. The war in Israel is showing that. China is outbilling us 10-1. By the way, right now, DV, we're on the eve of the Taiwanese presidential elections. It looks like the anti-China presidential candidate will win. As we speak, the Chinese are encircling the island of Taiwan with their ships. This is a risky time. So do you want to shut down the government while we're the first responders to what's going on in to the Red Sea? That the Houthis, funded by Iran, attacking us in the Red Sea and attacking shipping, that adds. People ask me, well, what does that have to do with us? Whether you like it or not, we're on a world economy. The world is interconnected on its economy, and that adds lots of cost to an already high inflationary time to get goods and services through the Suez Canal, because the Red Sea is attached to the Suez Canal, which opens up into the Atlantic, for those who don't have a map in front of us. And that's the quickest way to get goods and services from the Middle East, a lot of different places, the Indian Ocean, to the Western countries. Otherwise, you have to go around the Cape of Good Hope in Africa, which adds weeks and weeks and billions of dollars to the cost of goods and services that we rely on. I mean, would that we could produce everything in our country that we need, but the economy doesn't operate that way. So I know I've kind of bounced around.
No, we gone away from that, but it's real. Like there's microchips that are made in Taiwan, that if it goes to the Chinese, what happens? There's ways that we're interconnected, but then there's people.
Can I address that for a second?
Go ahead.
I went to Taiwan, and I want to tell the people who are listening, I go to the rough places. There's some nice trips that we can go on as congressmen to do some things. I go to Israel. I go to Kiev. I go to Rzeszów, Poland, where our weapons are entering Ukraine. I go to Taiwan. I go to the Philippines. That's where I want to go, because if I'm going to ask the American people to sacrifice their blood and treasure and their tax dollars to go somewhere else, we need to know what that looks like, and I need to see what it looks like. So I went to Taiwan, and what people need to know about Taiwan is TSMC, Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company. They are 2 generations ahead of anything else in the world on on the technological advances of their chips. That's not going to change. So if the Chinese either take over Taiwan or the Taiwanese destroy the TSMC on their own in a scorched earth policy if they're attacked, the cataclysmic effect that's going to have on life and the economic outlook of the entire world is catastrophic. I can't emphasize that. Is not hyperbole. That is the truth. We have come to rely, 90% of the chips that you use today come from Taiwan. Imagine if the Chinese own that. Or imagine if the Taiwanese say you can't have it and they blow it up. Yeah. That's not, you will see mass chaos throughout the rest of the world. Mass chaos, food shortages only leads to one thing, and that is world war. So addressing that issue, I'm a combat veteran. I've lost friends in combat. You know what I've talked about, losing friends after. We've lost more friends after than in. I am the last guy who wants to commit American troops to anything else. I'm the last guy. So if the Ukrainians are going to take out half the Russian army without an American drop of blood, okay, that's a good thing, because they are lining against us right now. And take a look at history. I'm a student of history, as I know you are. In fact, I want to add something before we go to the next question. You asked the most in-depth and intelligent questions of any media person I talk to, other than you and Mark Davis are on the same.
No.
Knowing what you're talking about, being educated on it, and then asking deep probing questions that are not emotional. So you need to know, and your listeners need to know, every time we do this, these are the most well thought out questions that I've ever heard, other than Mark Davis. And I'd say you guys are on parity. So keep doing what you're doing.
That's big. Thank you. Yeah, you know, it's with the Ukraine, you have a major, and even just in general in your district, you have a major rift when it comes to Ukraine. As a matter of fact, your opponents that are running against you, well, I'm going to have one on next week, but I had one on already, and not one red cent to Ukraine. That's it. No more, not to Ukraine. And there are some serious concerns. And we talked about that in the last interview about accountability, about why are we funding them? Are they really going to move on when they can't even take the Ukrainians on? I mean, can they really handle NATO and the F-35? I mean, there's those things that come into play. I want you to kind of, and you're talking to your constituents with this one, because you have a rift here about Ukraine. So tell them why their congressman thinks that it should be done this way, why we need to support Ukraine.
Oh, there's numerous reasons, but before I answer the question, I will tell those who are concerned about this issue. Again, I just explained why I think we should be allowing the Ukrainians to fight for themselves. We wanted the Afghans to fight for themselves. We want numerous countries that we have aided. We want the North Koreans, South Koreans to fight for themselves. You realize we've had 28,000 troops in Korea for 70 years? We have 70 years. That war's not even over. So I'm not for any more Americans deploying overseas into combat. Everybody needs to know this is the first time since 1938 a land invasion in Europe of European nations has occurred. The genocide that's being committed in Ukraine is pure evil. And I'm willing to help the Ukrainians help themselves to do that. And like I said, I've been to Rzeszów, Poland, and I've been to Ukraine. I know where the money is going. We have two of the big four accounting firms auditing every financial transaction. It is easy to say on Twitter, without attribution or evidence, that we're not keeping track of where the money's going. That is absolutely false. It's patently false. It's not true. I get classified briefings all the time. I went to Rzeszów, Poland. I know where this weaponry is going. We know when it's destroyed. We have Zooms back and forth between the Ukrainians and our troops in Poland to help repair this stuff. We know where it goes, and we know when it gets blown up. We know when it's expended. We know all of these things. 25% of the funding, and we've only voted on this once, by the way. So every time you hear of a tranche going over from here to Poland, it's still a part of that initial batch of funding, which included mainly weaponry to go over there. Additionally, 25% of it is to reconfigure our stocks with newer weapons. And make no mistake, based on what's going on around the world right now, we need to industrialize our war machine right now like it's 1941. Because if we don't, China is.
Yep.
If we don't, Russia is, Iran always has. They are all linked up. Russia is using Iranian and North Korean weapons to kill civilians in Ukraine. The Russians do what the Russians have always done. They killed 8 million Ukrainians in the 30s. Stalin did that. Right now, they've exported, stolen, kidnapped 400,000 Ukrainian kids and shipped them off to Russia for re-education, stole them from their parents. That is the definition of genocide. When I signed up for our military, I signed up to defend not only the United States, but the ideals which we represent in this country. The same thing that people fought for in World War II. The same thing people fought for in World War II. We got attacked by Japan, but we didn't stop that fight in Japan. We went to Europe and took it back too. Now, I ask you, if we hadn't gone to war and hadn't expended all that blood and treasure, if we had presidents who weren't trying to get reelected by keeping us out of war before they got us into it, do you think we would have saved a lot of American lives and a lot of lives everywhere else? No. I think that that's the case. So what I don't want us to do is trundle into World War III because we're turning our backs on something that eventually gets us into it. Remember, in World War II, we did not have NATO. We didn't have the United Nations. It happened, and we turned our backs as long as we could. But that war in Europe was going on for 4 years. The Germans took over France, Belgium, and most of Poland, Czechoslovakia. They were at the steps of destroying the army of Great Britain before Churchill did what he did and got them all out of there. I don't want to trundle into that. I want to prevent it. That's why you have a strong, robust defense. That's why you punch people back when they flick you in the nose, which this administration is not doing. And I'm not interested in as long as it takes. I'm interested in getting them the ATAC, as I called for it a year ago, that they just got this time, that is actually destroying the Russian military, their planes and their runways and their drones that they're using against Ukrainian civilians right now. At what point do you turn your back on evil? Is it okay, ever? I would argue that it's not. As a Christian man, I believe that there is a time to stand up, and it is inconvenient for us that Russia invaded Ukraine. And I do believe that if Donald Trump were the president on a second term, that would have never happened. But I can't get that time back. All I have to do is confront the threats of the future. And as a military man, as we discussed earlier, combat veteran, man who's lost men in combat, man who's lost friends after the combat, that the reason that I'm supporting Ukraine is so we don't get into World War III and we don't have to fight the Russians. Because if they get to Poland, DV, we're committed. If they get to Lithuania, we're committed. And then we are sending troops and soldiers and Marines and airmen over there to fight. That will happen. I don't want that.